August 216 BC. 86,000 Roman and Allied troops were absolutely obliterated by the smaller, barely 50,000 troop army of the Carthaginians at the Battle of Cannae. It's regarded today as one of the greatest tactical feats in military history, and was one of the worst defeats the Romans would experience in theirs. In fact, it is said that approximately only 15,000 Romans survived that day. Today, we begin a new Sabbath School Perspectives Quarterly, 3 cosmic messages. And as we begin this new quarter and a new series of lessons, we're going to begin by looking at a war in which there are people severely outnumbered who end up overwhelmingly victorious. You don't want to miss today's epic lesson. The Battle of Cannae is quite incredible. 86,000 Roman troops to barely 50,000 Carthaginians. The Romans were under the control of Lucius Paulus and Gaius Varro, who were consuls, kind of like senators. They were elected leaders of the second highest order in Rome. Under Roman law, Paulus commanded the troops one day and Varro the next. The day of August 216 BC, Gaius Varro was in command. He wanted to do battle. Of course, Paulus didn't. The now infamous general of the Carthaginians was Hannibal. He's widely viewed as one of the greatest military tacticians of all time. As the 86,000 Roman troops lined up for the Battle of Cannae, it is reported that a Carthaginian officer named Gisgo said to Hannibal that the size of the Roman army was astounding. After all, there were barely 50,000 Carthaginian soldiers lined up for battle. Hannibal responded to Gisgo. He said, there's one thing, Gisgo, yet more astonishing, that you have not taken notice of. Then he explained, in all of those great numbers of Romans before us, there is not one man named Gisgo. Of course, this provoked laughter throughout the Roman ranks. In today's lesson, we discover that we too are lined up in a life and death battle with a formidable foe. We are outnumbered and against incredible odds. But on all of those great numbers before us and against all those odds, there isn't one man against us who is called Jesus. And if God is for us, who can be against us? We'll be discussing that story and more in today's exciting lesson. But before we get to that, I want to welcome in our good friend and conference secretary, Elder Jeff Villegas. Jeff, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Ben. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, we're glad to do this. Of course, Daniel Hoover is normally sitting here as our host, and he's on vacation in the Philippines, so I get to do a little double duty and get to talk with you. Every week when we do our Sabbath School lesson, we do a 90-second countdown. And I'm really thrilled that you've taken the time to join us today and do our 90 seconds for us.
Well, thank you for that opportunity. I look forward to it.
All right. Well, Jeff, we're going to have our producers put you on the screen, and we're going to give you 90 seconds, and the time is yours. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm excited that for the next 3 months of our Sabbath School Quarterly, we're going to emphasize the beautiful theme of the 3 angels' messages from the book of Revelations. In Lesson 1, we are presented with a cosmic battle between good and evil. In the Seventh-day Adventist world, this battle is known as the Great Controversy. While this is a cosmic battle mainly between Satan and Christ and who ultimately will rule, the Great Controversy is also about the souls of every person that has lived since the creation of Adam and Eve. It is about who will be our master. The choice we make, of course, has eternal consequences. The choice is left to us because, you see, God has given each person the expression of free will. He doesn't force or coerce anyone to follow him. We must want to follow him because we choose to do so, but above all, because we love him. And as the lesson beautiful points out, love is an expression of free will. The question we each must ask ourselves is, who will have our allegiance? Who will have my worship? Who will have my obedience and my love? If we're honest with ourselves, though, choosing Christ is not an easy task, because you see, Satan constantly assaults us with the most enticing temptations so we can fall and suffer the condemnation of sin, which is eternal death. This is why the scripture reminds us in Ephesians 6:11, put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil.
Wow, Jeff, that's awesome. And you even left 3 seconds on the clock. How about that?
Yes, no, I tried my best, man.
Oh, that's good. That's good. You have any other thoughts that you'd like to share with us before we let you go and we get to the panel to discuss this lesson?
Yes, I do. If you'll just allow me another maybe 3 seconds or longer. But really, good news is this, Ben, that Jesus Christ has overcome the devil. Jesus paid the price for our sins. And if we accept his atonement for us by faith, we stand as perfect before God the Father because Jesus covers us with his righteousness. Indeed, we are more than conquerors with Christ Jesus. Hallelujah. And I'm glad that Jesus did this for us.
Amen. Amen. That's really cool stuff, Jeff, and I really appreciate you jumping on for a few moments and sharing your thoughts with us as we dive into a new quarter. This is going to be an exciting series of lessons, I think.
Oh, I believe so. I'm just looking forward to spending the next time together in studying, because this is a message that needs to be preached to all the world.
That's right. That's right. We're going to send it over to our panel. If you're watching with us, don't leave. We'll be back right after these messages.
Good morning, Sabbath School. You know who I am. You've seen me on For Just a Moment, and I want to take just a moment to be able to tell you something really exciting that's going on in our conference. It's something that near and dear to my heart, as we are doing something special coming up in the city of New Orleans. We're doing citywide evangelistic meetings in New Orleans. It's going to begin April 29, and I need your help to help make this successful. I learned a long time ago that wherever there's more prayer, there is more power. And I need men and women across our whole conference, as you're in Sabbath School, to pray earnestly for the evangelistic meetings. I can tell you right now that the devil's been working hard with a lot of things behind the scenes. He's going to continue to work hard as we move forward. So I need you to pray for some things specifically. I want you to pray, if you would, for every speaker who's going to preach during these series. I want you to pray for each church that's involved. I'm going to ask you to pray particularly that our advertising goes really well, both in the mail as well as digitally. And I want you to pray for people who are sincerely looking for something in their hearts and minds. And if you would do that and pray earnestly that the Holy Spirit would be poured out, there'd be a huge harvest. We would appreciate that so very much. So thank you for letting me have just a moment to share with you about this important thing that's coming in our conference.
Welcome back. We're glad that you're joining us for this week's Sabbath School Perspectives. We're beginning a brand new lesson, and this one looks to be pretty exciting. I'm joined now by our Sabbath School panel. Of course, they don't need any introduction to you. You know Keith there in the center and Leonardo to the right. Guys, Leonardo, how are you guys doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me here.
Well, Leonardo, probably I should be saying thank you to you. You're the Sabbath School director for our conference, and you're the one that let me step in. Daniel's on vacation in the Philippines, so you let me in.
Well, I should say, remember, I'm the Sabbath School director, but today you are the host. And not only that, you're the media director. So that means that you have the control of this setup.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
you
good
could
stuff.
mute us if you want to.
Keith, there in the middle. How are you doing, man? It's good to have you in here too.
I'm doing well. It's great to
Good.
be here with you.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm a little envious of Daniel being on vacation in the Philippines. Maybe we should get him to patch in and do some work with us one of these times.
Hey, I've been on a webinar with someone who was in the Philippines before, and they have some decent internet over there sometimes, so it could work.
It could work.
Indeed.
Well, let's get to today's lesson. We are beginning, of course, a new quarter. And today's lesson for this week, the first lesson is Jesus wins and Satan loses. I've heard a number of people say it in the past, and I think it bears repeating. It's worth repeating that the theme of not just the book of Revelation, but the theme of the Bible. I tell them, I said, I've read the end of the book and I know how the outcome is. Jesus wins. And that seems to be the most fantastic news, the great hope, in addition to the second coming of Jesus, is that Jesus is going to win and our problems will be over. I don't know about you guys. Life seems to be full of challenges and problems. What do you think?
That's something that, I was amazed with this lesson, because most of the times we're so afraid of challenges. And that reminds me that sometimes we are not 100% sure that the victory has been ours.
Mm,
And we're always with different fears in life. And even when we are facing spiritual warfare,
mm,
that we start thinking, are we really doing the right thing, or is this is something that is being caused just because I'm not doing the right thing, or because the devil is attacking me, or something like that? And it might be. However, we have to be sure that through the death of Christ on the cross of Calvary, He has given us the assurance of salvation. But sometimes I see that in Christianity, even, I have been pondering in the way that I act, that sometimes I do not trust God in the way that I am supposed to be. So that really calls my attention, because while we're studying throughout the lesson, we're gonna see how Jesus wins, and Satan is completely defeated. That's a fact.
it sounds like you're saying that I'm constantly at war with myself,
That's
and
right.
and Keith, the Bible talks about that there was war in heaven. One of our main verses today, the memory verse, is that the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring who keep the commandments of God and keep the testimony of Jesus. War in heaven. Talk to us a little bit about that war. What's going on, and how does that relate to us and the battles that Leonardo is just describing?
Oh man, war in heaven. You would think, we talk about heaven as this paradise kind of place that everything's perfect. And so this concept of war in heaven, for those who have experienced war, is an especially traumatic kind of way of referring to what's going on here. But John uses this language of there being war in heaven for, some might try to boil it down to an argument, but when we look at the stakes of the argument, I think war is an appropriate descriptor of what is going on, because it's not just about who's right and who's wrong, but who is right and who is wrong have consequences that affect the rulership of the entire universe, the rulership of heaven itself. And when we have those kinds of consequences on the line, an argument can be a great and heavy thing to deal with. Um, So we have, of course, Satan, who is the dragon, and he is wanting to have control. He's saying that God isn't fair, that God's laws aren't fair. We can go into Ezekiel chapter 28 and see how God talks about Lucifer as he was in heaven, and he was this beautiful creature, this incredible angel of high ranking, and how he leveraged that to try to get more, that he lacked some contentedness and was leveraging that to try to get more. And when you leverage that to try and get more, and you're essentially starting a civil war, you're trying to say, no, I'm the one who should be in charge here, not you. And you're seeking to have some kind of a coup, some kind of a change of government. That argument can become into something very warlike very quickly. And after Satan is defeated in heaven, because of course this week's lesson, Jesus wins, Satan loses. So after Satan is defeated in heaven, he comes back here down to earth in Revelation 12:17, and he makes war against the remnant of the woman, of her offspring, the remnant of her offspring, who had been hidden in the wilderness. And during that time, I don't know
Sorry
what
about
that was, but
that.
it's all
I
good.
got a chime
Uh,
from one of my apps in the background. Sorry about that.
that's all good. It happens. But during that time of war of Satan making war against the offspring of the woman who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus,
Mhm.
That's where we're living right now. We are in this time where Satan is making war, not because he believes he can win, but I think it's to try to lessen the margin of his loss.
Sure.
No.
Let's talk about that war for just a moment. The Bible says there was war in heaven. What is the actual war? Is this like, did they have tanks up there in heaven and bazookas, or maybe they just had swords and lightsabers? I'm not, to use some modern culture. Leonardo, what is the actual war that's being fought?
This is here we have a conflict, a cosmic conflict taking place. We have we have this process where Satan, that we have the symbol of the dragon, but Satan and the woman, that is a symbol of the church. They have been fighting, and as Keith was explaining, everything was originated in heaven by Lucifer, who rebelled against God and against the heaven. And then this brought some consequences when when the dragon was hurled down to the earth. And then we can see how the dragon was enraged and went against the woman, against the church. Now Paul says something that implies each and every one of us when it says our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authority, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. That being said, the Apostle Paul is saying that the church, the woman, everybody is involved in this spiritual warfare that is taking place. And the verse, Ben, that you start reading off says that the dragon went to do war against the offspring of the woman, those who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. So
Mhm.
we can see that the dragon understands that he has a specific mission, which is to destroy the woman and the offspring of that woman. So when we have that description, we need to understand that you and I, all the audience that is listening to us, is involved in this process. So it's not something that we are going to be seeing tanks and bazookas and something physically, but spiritually.
Mhm.
And we need to understand now that we're going to be discussing different aspects throughout this quarter in the book of Revelation, that the book of Revelation speaks in symbols. We have the
Yes.
dragon, we have the woman, we have the child that we're going to be discussing later on, the rod of iron, and so on. So let's understand that this battle, this war that started off in heaven, is something that is real, that is taking place, and you and I are part of this great controversy that is taking place, and is moving along as we come to the end.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we're going to talk about those symbols in just a moment. I guess I want to circle back just for a moment and talk about the war itself and emphasize the idea. And Leonardo, you did a good job of filling in on top of what Keith just described as well. But the idea of war itself is the idea that there was a choice that was being made there in the courts of heaven, right? That they were trying to decide whether or not they were going to serve God, or they were going to serve something else. And the Bible Revelation points out that something else was Lucifer, a fallen angel of light. And the great battle even that we fight today in this spiritual warfare is the opportunity to choose. Paul says, the thing I want to do, I don't do. The things I do want to do, I don't do. It's we're at war in our minds, as it were, for choice, and it's like the freedom to choose has to be the fundamental principle of God's government, that you and I can be who we are, choose to follow Him or choose not to follow Him, and because if we can't choose, then we're not really loving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the fundamental principle of God's government is founded on love. In this idea of war, I want to share a quote before we move on. I found this. It's by Gary North. He wrote a book entitled "Backward Christian Soldiers." I was sharing this with you when we were doing our preparation for today's lesson. The subtitle to this book, "Backward Christian Soldiers," the subtitle is "An Action Manual for Christian Reconstruction." And that kind of catches my attention, this idea of Christian reconstruction. What could that be? Listen to what the author says. He says, Satan may be alive on planet Earth, but he's not well. He's in the biggest trouble he's been in since Calvary. If Christians adopt a vision of victory and a program of Christian reconstruction, we will see the beginning of a new era on earth, the kingdom of God being manifested in every area of life. When Christ returns, Christians will be occupying, not hiding. I really love that idea that we Christians can be out in the open with our faith and not have to be in an attitude of hiding our faith, or hiding behind some kind of canopy to protect us from what's going on the outside. That somehow through all of this, we can be victorious. And so I just really like that idea, that concept. Okay, yeah. Leonardo, you introduced us to the idea of these symbols. You already mentioned the dragon. Who's the dragon, Leonardo?
It's the devil, Satan.
Satan himself, that's right. And who's the woman?
The woman is the church, according to the book of Ephesians.
That's right. That's exactly right. And Keith, you and I, we kind of wish we would have been recording during our show preparation today, our lesson preparation, but we were talking about this male child and this rod of iron. And I'm just going to defer to you and let you kind of unpack that a little bit, because I think it's important to understanding the battlefield that we're on and this idea of choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, during a little bit of our pre-recording talk and our little bit of prep that we were doing, Ben, you said something that the rod of iron and the birth of the child and all of this, it's not pointing us to the first coming of Christ, but to the second coming of Christ. And I have to say, I was caught in something that I often criticize others for being caught in, which was a too strict a biblical literalism. And I looked at the text and I was sitting here confused for a number of minutes while you and Leonardo were talking. I'm like, how is this about that? Because if you look in Revelation chapter 12, in we have this woman, clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, on her head a crown of 12 swords. We have the church here, and she's pregnant, crying out in birth pangs, and this great red dragon comes and is there at the birth of the child, trying to swallow up the male child as soon as it's born, and she gives birth to the son. This is verse 5 of Revelation chapter 12. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was snatched away and taken to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God so that she can be nourished for 1,260 days. And I looked at that and I was like, well, there's no way this is about the second coming, because it talks about the 1,260 days after the time of the snatching away of, the coming of the child and the snatching away of the child and all of this. And you pointed out and I had to ask you about it because it was bugging me. But we look so often to the incarnation itself when we look at verse 5 of Revelation chapter 12. But what Revelation 12:5 is about is not the incarnation. It is about the death and the resurrection and the reign of Christ in heaven. So it is the ascension that it's about, that being snatched away and taken to God and his throne. That is about the ascension, not about the birth. The birth happened, but and as we were talking about that, and as you clarified it, I had this realization that, well, yeah, of course. I mean, why would John be getting a vision about the birth of Jesus when we already have, by the point that John is receiving these visions and writing the book of Revelation, we already have a number of Gospels, accounts of Jesus, including accounts of his birth and his incarnation. John himself had likely written his Gospel by this point, where he talks about the Word becoming flesh and living among us, that it's not about the incarnation here. This is about the assurance of victory that we have, that Jesus was victorious over Satan as Satan tried to devour him, and now he reigns with God. And we are then, the church was then taken to a place prepared by God where she would be safe for that 1,260 days until time was fulfilled in certain ways, and the events of history could continue on. But that is that assurance, that the fact of the ascension is our assured hope of our own resurrection and ascension as well. Jesus says in John 14:3, for if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come back again and bring you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also.
So good. I wanted you to share that, Keith, because I could see as you were sharing that there was a little twinkle in your eye, a little glee in your voice, and it's like that when we learn something new, when we expose ourselves to a new concept or to a new precept, we get to see things happening, and it's pretty exciting to see that. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. So Jesus ascends. The church is now going through the wilderness. We talk about that wilderness experience, the 1,260 days. By the way, Jesus rules with a rod of iron. What is the rod of iron? I should have
Leonardo?
asked. Yeah, go ahead, Leonardo.
Yeah, it's the authority that the Christ will have through the victory of the cross.
Yes.
He will rule, because he will be able to overcome, not only by dying, but to resurrect and then ascend to heaven to finalize the last process, in the process of salvation, that is called the atonement, as he is interceding for each one of us in the heavenly sanctuary.
Yeah. So in reality, when we look at the rod of iron, it's Revelation 19 calls it the word of God, doesn't it? That Jesus rules in truth and in righteousness, because that's what he demonstrated on the cross.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, just for a minute, let's sidebar.
Real quick.
Go ahead, Keith.
I want to jump in real quick with one more thing on that. Revelation chapter 12 verse 11 talks about how we conquer the devil and how we overcome. And it says, "But they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony."
Mm-hmm.
And that is the same way that Jesus conquered, by his own blood and by the word of his testimony. So we see that connection there coming through in both ways. How that ruling with a rod of iron is this conquering by not the the idea of a rule with an iron fist, but
Mm-hmm.
rather with a measuring rod of
Yes.
iron, which is his blood and the word of his
Yes.
testimony.
That is so good. So good. So well said. I want to sidebar for a second. I'm glad you jumped in on that. Let's take another little rabbit trail. The lesson actually brings it out, but I want to focus on it for a minute. We've talked about victorious living. We've talked about overcoming. The Greek word for overcoming, and it's used over and over again throughout the book of Revelation. It's in Revelation chapter 5. It's in chapter 12. This idea of overcoming. And it's the Greek word Nikeo, which is where we get our English word Nike. You guys wear Nike tennis shoes?
Yes, of course.
I used to. I actually don't have any Nikes in my closet right now, but I've worn them in the past.
You know,
Yeah,
when I
I
was a
do.
kid,
My wife always makes sure that I have some of those.
you have Nikes, yeah. When I was a kid growing up, I didn't want to wear anything but Nikes. Of course, I was a child of the 80s. And of course, in the 1980s in basketball, there was one guy that rose above all others. Michael Jordan. My generation calls him the GOAT. Some of the younger generations like to think of other guys. All I can say is bless their hearts. But anyway, when we were talking about this a little earlier, when Michael Jordan got into the league and he became the star basketball player that he became, you guys know what the number one shoe brand in the NBA was in 1983?
It was either Adidas or Converse, I
That's
think.
right. That's right. Most NBA players were wearing one of those two brands, probably more likely Converse, but Adidas were also right there. And Jordan signed a shoe deal with a company called Nike. And I don't have time to go into all the details, but one reason that he chose Nike above the others, even though Nike was about to go bankrupt, they were a failing company, nobody was buying their shoes. Jordan gets Nike deal, and one of the reasons he chose Nike was because they were victorious. Nike means victorious, and he wanted to be victorious in his career. By the way, little tidbit that to this day, Air Jordans are the number one selling tennis shoe on the planet, even though Michael Jordan has been retired for more than 20 years. Victorious. All right. Hey, guys, our time is getting past really quickly. We're going to go over just a little bit, but I want to ask you guys two questions. Keith, I'm going to start with you, and then Leonardo, I'll come to you.
All right.
We're talking about victorious living. We're talking about the church going through some tough times, and we haven't emphasized very much of that as we've looked at our lesson. But I wonder if there's a time in your life, Keith, that you could have easily been discouraged, and now as you're looking back, you say, wow, God just really provided a place of refuge for me in my time of challenge. I wonder if you would take 2 minutes. I'm gonna put the timer on the screen. No, I'm just kidding. I won't. But I wonder if you take 2 minutes to describe a time in your life where you saw God being victorious in the midst of your challenge.
Yeah. I think I'll go back a little bit in my life. I graduated from Walla Walla University in 2009 with a degree in theology. And those who aren't plugged into ministry and such may not have realized, but hardly anyone was hiring new pastors in 2009. Most conferences were laying people off and barely getting by with their payrolls, let alone continuing to hire and add people in.
That's right.
So it was not a good time to be graduating with a degree in theology. But and it took me a couple of years after that, actually 3 years, to end up going to seminary. I went as some called me a free agent for Christ, not sponsored by any conference, but I was at seminary as a free agent, able to go wherever God called me to go after, and He did call me here to Arkansas, Louisiana conference. But
And we're grateful for
during
that.
those 3 years, I am too. I am too. During those 3 years of between degrees, I had a lot of learning to do in how it was to really rely on God and practice my faith in ways. And I think it was something that a lot of pastors with my kind of experience. I was raised in the Seventh Day Adventist Church. I experienced my call to ministry when I was 17 years old. There hasn't been a time where I've been, dealing with working outside of the church. All of my jobs that I worked with, I worked in my academy. I worked for a time at Pacific Press Publishing Association. I had worked almost exclusively for the church and never had to deal with what a lot of our members do deal with in the potential of having to work on the Sabbath day. And during those 3 years, I worked for a now defunct sporting goods retailer, and was challenged fairly early on to end up having to work on Sabbath. And when I refused, I was threatened with write-ups for lying, for a no-call, no-show, all these kinds of things that did not materialize because I was in the right, but I had that opportunity to really be standing up for what I believe in and to realize how much God would provide, because I knew the penalties that I was potentially facing going into it if I did not show up for that shift, and none of those penalties hit. In fact, about 6 months later, the manager who had tried to make me work on Sabbath ended up being fired for a number of other reasons, and I was promoted, not to his position, but was promoted up, in part, I believe, because of the faithfulness that I had demonstrated in my belief there. So there are ways, and it was a tough time for a little bit because it felt like I was being punished when I initially had said no. I was moved into another department in the store where they wouldn't expect me to come in and work on Sabbath, because they really wanted my job to be working on Sabbath morning, and they ended up giving that up. A couple of months later, moved me back into the position I had been in, and later on was promoted there.
Wow. Wow. What a testimony. As you're talking, I couldn't help but think you really were living out the memory verse this week, that you were having war raged against you, even though you were keeping the commandments of God and the testimony of Jesus. That's pretty
Yeah.
spectacular. Thank you for sharing that, Leonardo. If Satan can't destroy Jesus, and we know that Jesus was victorious on the cross, then the next thing that he's going to try to do is destroy people, his followers. And you've chosen not just to be a follower of Jesus, you've chosen to be a minister for Christ, and you've pastored multiple churches at a time. You're pastoring a church now, even though you're doing departmental responsibilities for the conference. 2 minutes, not prophetic. Keith took some prophetic minutes.
Hey man,
But
you give a preacher a time limit without putting a clock, and it's really hard to not.
That's true. I should have put the clock up for you, huh? Shouldn't I? Leo, take just a couple minutes. We're over time, but it's okay. This is really good, and I want people to connect with it, but I want them to connect the Bible to real life. Everybody out there is having challenges, and everybody out there is having struggles, and as pastors, we feel it sometimes differently than others. But take just a moment to give us some encouragement that you're facing battles and challenges. Think about a challenge that you've had and give us some encouragement that we can be more than victorious through Jesus Christ our Lord. 2 minutes though, right? 2 minutes.
Yes, Ben, thank you for allowing me, because that is something that I really want to share with our audience. Um, the lesson talks about the experience of the wilderness.
That's right.
The Israelites went through the wilderness. They have their challenges. Jesus went through the wilderness. He had his challenges. And the woman went through the wilderness and had its challenges. And we're still having the challenges. So that means that the process of going through the wilderness is something that each one of us has to go through. I remember a situation that I had. For some of you might know, some of you might not know. When I got married with my wife, she was in Venezuela. I was here in the United States trying to work her documents and everything to so that she could be able to come here legally to the United States. And as we were going through that process, it was a very hard situation when we had to be completely separated because of this situation with her legal process. And one of the things that I will never forget is the fact that as we were trying to bring her here, every single thing was getting harder. Every single thing. Um, I never forget that one of the processes that happens is that the consulate closed down their all the process that they were doing because of the bad relationship that Venezuela is currently having with the United States. So they said we're not going to be taking any more cases. So we were very discouraged, and through that process, while Venezuela was living in a chaos and situations were getting harder, my wife was kidnapped because some people knew that she was married with a U.S. citizen. That has been one of the worst situations that I have ever lived in my entire life. I was here in the United States. I was preaching that week. That week, I was having a week of evangelism in the state of New Jersey. I was completely frustrated because the love of my life was way far away from me, and now I just came to the realization that she was kidnapped. There was nothing that I could do. My mother-in-law called me. She just let me know what had happened. She didn't even know, what the kidnappers were gonna be asking for, and that situation really hit me where it hurts the most. And I just want to say that I just start crying, and I just say, God, you know what my situation is. You know where my wife is, and the Bible says that if we trust in you, you will be in control of the situation, even when we are going through the midst of the blazing fire. And we didn't know. I hadn't heard anything. I was calling my mother-in-law. I was crying, please let me know what is happening with my wife. I want to make sure that she's fine, she's safe. Nothing was happening. I was praying. I called a few people. We start praying. All of the sudden, the only thing that we heard is that they have been delivered. They let them go without asking for anything. They were talking. My wife afterwards, they were telling me that they were taking them into a place that they had said, we are gonna kill them. We have to ask for certain type of remuneration. We're gonna kill them, and we will throw them, in a place where nobody's gonna be able to find them. But all of the sudden, somebody says, we have to let them go. We have to let them go. We shouldn't be doing anything to these folks. They are innocent people. It seems to be that they were confusing them with some other people, but by the grace of God and our prayers, God set them free. Let me tell you, folks, I could going on and on. I'm just giving you a nutshell of what happened in my experience. But in the same way that God was able to deliver me from that wilderness that I was going through, God is able to do the same thing with you. And it doesn't matter how hard it is, what you are going through, God is always working, even when we are going through the wilderness. So may the Lord help us in our experience. And even though when we are being challenged with spiritual warfare, the Lord is still in control, and He's doing the same thing that He has been doing in the past.
Wow, Leonardo, that is an amazing testimony.
Yeah. Oh man, shocking through
yeah.
that, and blessings of God in it are incredible.
I was watching Keith's reaction as you were sharing, and his eyebrows went up, and he's like, "Whoa! I didn't see that coming."
No, I did not. I did
Yeah.
not see the kidnapping coming or anything else that went along with that. So, but
And I can
Yeah.
tell you, when I'm in the conference office working out of my office is right across the hall from Juliana's. I'm going to see her in a different light. She is a walking miracle of Jesus, isn't she?
That's right.
Leonardo, thank you so much for sharing that. Our time is well past. We need to wrap this lesson up. And I want to say to our audience, thanks for sticking with us today. You know, the real irony of this lesson is that God made people with a choice, and he had to make us with a choice. Otherwise, that's not love. We either choose to love God or we choose not to love God. There's no neutrality. You can't serve both, and it's either or. If you're not serving God, you are serving yourself or Satan. And if you are serving God, then you're dying to self daily. It's really the great irony, isn't it? God had no choice but to make us with a choice. And it's the great irony of God's divinity. Keith, thank you for sharing with us today. Leonardo, thank you so much for your testimony. Wherever you're watching or listening to us from, we pray God's blessing on you and in your Bible study. We want to invite you to take just a moment to like and subscribe and share if you haven't already. Hit the little notification button, the bell, so that you can get notified when we upload and drop new videos each week. And also want to take just a moment. Every week our conference sends out a e-newsletter. It's called The Lead, and we'd like to invite you to take just a moment to go to our website. We'll put the QR code and the link on the screen. You can just click on that. You can subscribe, get the latest news and updates from around our conference. See what God is doing in Arkansas, Louisiana, and be a part of it, rejoicing with us, keeping things in prayer. And we know that you'll be blessed. Of course, if you don't like it, you can always unsubscribe, though we know you won't want to once you get it. Wherever you are, we want to say God's blessings to you. Take care, and we'll see you next time.